So I have a very strict policy of not engaging in Chinese social media. I do not have a Chinese social media account.
That is such a beautiful lie. I have to give it to him. After I did my 2 videos on the fake internet professor Jiang Xueqin, a lot of people said they don't care about whether he is a real professor or not. What they care about is the fact that his predictions are right. The famous Chinese internet professor Jiang Xueqin is known for only 2 predictions that turned out to be right. Here are some of his many predictions that turned out to be wrong.
It's very likely that Trump will become president of the United States again in November, and he will pick Nikki Haley as his VP. So a lot of what he will do as president depends on if he picks Nikki Haley to be VP or not. And I'm making the prediction that he will win in November and that he will pick Nikki Haley as his vice president. Given the way things are turning out, I imagine that Nikki Haley becomes vice president. And I'll make the bet that he picks Nikki Haley.
Trump wrote, quote, Nikki Haley is not under consideration for VP slot.
She's not going to be chosen as a vice president.
It happened again with his predictions on France.
Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, has called for an early election. And it's possible in 3 months' time, Marine Le Pen's party will run and govern France, okay?
In a shock result for all, the far-left coalition has unexpectedly become the biggest party in the French parliament. Stunned by tonight's results, Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party.
And again with Iran.
The Iranian president died. There's going to be a election, okay? So in late June, there will be someone to replace the president. And it's most likely that the current vice president, who is Mohammed Mokbar, will become the new president.
In Iran, where in the last few hours, the reformist candidate Masoud Pezeshkian has been elected the country's new president, beating his hardline conservative rival Saeed Jalili.
And again with US politics.
Donald Trump, okay? And to staff his cabinet, his government with pro-Israel individuals, okay, who include Mike Pompeo.
Trump announcing Nikki Haley and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo definitely not be returning.
My name is Lu. I break down how China is talked about in the West from the perspective of someone who actually grew up there. Today, we're going to yet again talk about the fake Chinese internet professor, Jiang Xueqin. So make sure to subscribe.
And by the way, your content that you create in China that you upload on YouTube, do you also upload it on the channels in China, or is it mainly for the content in US?
So I have a very strict policy of not engaging in Chinese social media. I do not have a Chinese social media account.
That is such a beautiful lie. I have to give it to him. He is right that he doesn't have an official Chinese social media account. But if you look on Chinese internet, if you look on Xiaohongshu, the little red note, or Douyin Chinese TikTok, or Weibo, so that's Chinese Twitter or X, you will see his content. You will see people commenting, reacting, and referring to his content. So it doesn't really matter whether he has an official Chinese social media account or not. He is very much aware, as you know, the rest of us Chinese people, we are very aware of his influence inside and outside China.
Chinese reporters have reached out to have interviews with me, and I've said no. Chinese people have reached out to me and said they want to work with me, and I've said no. And the reason why is that I understand.
And when you say they
reached
out, who reached out to you? Like the bigger platforms or media companies, or all the way from the top to CCP?
Well, Tsinghua professors at the very elite universities in China, Tsinghua University. And I don't want to talk to these people because they represent the government. And I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm compromised and have to become a mouthpiece for the government.
We will never know whether he's telling the truth or not here. But I do want to tell you that when you grow up in an authoritarian regime, the government doesn't really need to tell you what to say. A lot of people, when they think about authoritarian regimes, they think about this very direct suppression, which does happen. But that is not the majority of the suppression that is happening to us. The Chinese Communist Party never needed to reach out to me personally to tell me what to say and what not to say. But I just know, because I grew up in the system, It's something that you kind of just naturally pick up. And this applies to not only individuals in China, but also organizations in China, platforms in China. Platforms that you know today, like Xinlang Weibo, the Chinese X. I was lucky enough or unlucky enough to kind of witness the growth of this digital platform. And the platform at its early age, without being asked by the authority, did a lot of self-censoring. They hired teams after teams to filter out sensitive information on the platform to kind of toe the line. And that is the only reason why this private platform was able to grow into the biggest social media platform on China's internet, so that the Chinese Communist Party would let him be.
And so my main priority is to maintain my independence, my freedom. And I make content for Westerners. And so I have a lot more freedom because I operate in a gray zone in China where I'm not a Chinese citizen, so I'm not bound by Chinese surveillance laws.
I wish that was true. I wish my Canadian passport would give me protection if I ever choose to go back to China. He was a Canadian citizen when he was arrested, detained in solitary confinement in a Chinese cell for 48 hours years ago, when he was there being a freelance reporter for a US publication.
If they suspected you of being a spy, how did they let you back in? China's not known for being that trusting.
The fact that he is a Canadian citizen means absolutely nothing to the Chinese Communist Party. If the Chinese Communist Party think that he is out of line, that he said something that would offend or endanger or threaten their narratives, he would disappear. There are currently multiple Chinese Canadians who are in jail for the exact same reason. And need I remind you, the two Michaels, the two Canadians who were arbitrarily detained in China a few years ago. So he is not operating in a gray zone in any way. The fact that he was born there, that he is Chinese, like first generation Chinese, in the eyes of the Chinese Communist Party, he is property of the party, and they could do whatever they want with him.
So have they ever knocked on your door and said, hey, you're crossing a line, Jiang, pump the brakes, that's too much, relax? Or no, they leave you alone, nobody's knocked on your door?
I work at a school. I'm employed by the school. They have legal responsibility for me. And there was one time when I wrote a Substack essay that mentioned China, and I was given a call by the school leadership and told to pull it down. I'm not at liberty to tell you what the content was, but I will tell you that I'm being monitored very heavily.
I can only imagine that.
Even if he is telling the truth here, right? Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't really matter because he is staying inside China right now. He knows exactly what not to say and what to say so that the Chinese Communist Party would let him be. And so you might ask, what is the official line that would appease the Chinese Communist Party? I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the Chinese authorities. What kind of global narratives would benefit a rising authoritarian power that is constantly looking to take on the United States head on? That is the collapse of the Western democracies, right? The collapse of the US-led democratic world.
And the major pattern is how empires tend to decline. And so a pattern emerges where empires in decline, if the United States would go to war with Iran, then it would lose this war because the United States would not have the manufacturing capacity. They would lose the petrodollar. The American economy would collapse. America is going to have a hard time holding onto its empire. So it's not in the best interest of America to maintain its empire.
Now, you might have your reservations about the United States, especially if you're from Canada or Europe. Fair enough. I respect that. I'm always open for criticism of any given world order. But just try to imagine the horrible, much worse alternative where we're led by China, Russia, and Iran.
I can easily see China overtaking South Korea in like 5 years' time.
And the Chinese Communist Party understands very well how to tap into your domestic politics to push forward this narrative that is ultimately going to benefit China, Iran, and Russia.
And I make content for Westerners. And so I have a lot more freedom to comment about Western society than, say, if I were in Western society, right? So Canada has become a very authoritarian society. If I said certain things that I said in Canada, then it's possible that I get visited by the police. And that'd be true for Europe. It wouldn't be true for the United States, but there would be some other issues as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I have talked a lot about how the Chinese Communist Party has been trying to tap into the left-leaning pundits in the West, in the States, in Canada, and globally, really. He is an example of how the Chinese Communist Party is actually trying to tap into the conservative side of the political spectrum. You can notice this very subtle agreement to shift people's perspective on him. Now I have to ask you to once again put your domestic politics aside and try to think about what he's trying to do here. He said everything that a conservative Canadian would want to hear. If you're a conservative Canadian, you hear something like that along the line of how Canada is becoming more authoritarian, and you will be like, oh, that's right, what he's saying is right. I agree with him. This guy can be trusted. He agrees with me. And in this hour-long interview, he also said that he would vote for Trump.
So if I were American and I had the opportunity to vote in November of 2024, I would have voted for Trump over Biden.
Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But he is signaling, he is commenting on your domestic politics to try to gain your trust and support so he can tell you and convince you his opinions on China, which, by the way, is a lie.